Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel, Two Guys Take on Real Estate. My name's Kevin, I'm the Property Prince, and I'm here to talk to you today about how you can make sure your rental property tenants are paying you on time and in full every month. If you're interested in finding out 3 tips about how you can make sure this happens, stick around. But first, I want to make sure everybody who hasn't taken a moment and subscribed to our channel clicks that subscribe button and rings the notifications bell, because we come up with about 3 videos a week these days for us to help you learn your path forward in real estate. We're all about paying it forward here at Two Guys Take on Real Estate and sharing our experience with you. So stick around and learn with us as we bring you informational videos about all different types of real estate topics.
Two guys take on real estate.
So today we're talking about 3 tips that'll help you get started in your rental property business and make sure that you collect your rent in full and on time every month. Now that's one of the biggest challenges I think anybody will agree with if they've had any experience with real estate rental management that exists, is collecting rent in full and on time. So here's 3 tips that are going to help make that happen for you. The first thing I want to talk to you about is to make sure, number 1, you set expectations. You set them early and you go through them in writing with each and every new tenant. Now, sometimes you inherit tenants when you acquire a property. Sometimes maybe you didn't have great practices and you have to kind of backtrack and develop, some set expectations with an existing tenant that maybe you didn't know better and you onboarded poorly. But as you add new tenants, you want to make sure you have all the expectations that you're going to have in writing as part of your lease agreement or a separate doc that they receive and they sign off of at the time that they move in. And you want to have, I really like to suggest, an actual live orientation where you actually have a conversation with everybody. And it's less of a conversation and more of a speech from you, the landlord, or even a recorded video. If you're trying to do this at large scale, or you want to make sure everybody signs off saying that they got the same introductory speech, you could record a video setting these expectations and then have the tenant sign off that they watched the orientation video. So when I say setting expectations, what do I mean? Well, easy thing. So first of all, make sure you are letting them know exactly what your expectations are. Make sure they understand when rent is due. Usually it's the first of the month, but I've had people that go to move in and they move in mid-month and they think, does that mean the rent is only due mid-month? Nope. We prorated this month for you, so you're only paying for half of the month. Your next payment is due, April 1st. What happens on April 2nd if the rent's not paid? Is the rent late? Yeah, it was due on the 1st. It's late on the 2nd. So setting expectations, making sure people understand that that's one of their many responsibilities as a tenant. One of their perhaps primary responsibilities as a tenant is to make sure the rent is paid on time and know exactly when it's due. The second thing I want to make sure people understand, and it's basically tip number 2 here, is be consistent. So tip 2, be consistent with all of your practices. Now, what happens when the rent's not paid? You can't do one thing for one person and another thing for another person. You have to adopt and put very consistent practices into place that will help make sure everybody is treated uniformly and the same. You don't want to have, when you start treating people differently, you start opening yourselves up to discrimination claims. So for instance, I would say if you have a policy of, maybe you have a slow payer, maybe somebody pays $200 on the 1st, the rent's $1,000, they pay $200 on the 1st, they pay $500 on the 15th, and then they pay the remaining $300 by the end of the month. That's different than somebody that pays nothing until the 15th or all of it on the 1st. So you want to make sure you're treating everybody the same. Have a policy perhaps where if somebody hasn't paid their rent in full by the 7th of the month, you initiate the eviction process. And you can also let people know that it's the same for everybody. So basically, if the rent's not paid in full, you start the eviction process by sending out the notice to quit. Whatever the first date, your state's first step is, you start that process on the 7th. So is it a grace period? Kind of. It doesn't change the due date of the rent, but you don't really start taking legal action until they've missed their obligation by about 7 days. Now, I don't want to be sending out notices to quit for every single person that owes me just $5. If they paid most of their rent but didn't pay all of it, do you really want to send out a notice to quit? Probably not. So maybe create a threshold, and you can set that however you want as long as you set it and use it the same for everybody. So consider doing something like this. Maybe if anybody that owes more than $500 by the 7th of the month gets the initiation into the eviction process. Anybody that owes less than $500 by the 7th of the month doesn't get that notice. Maybe they instead, get phone calls and some follow-up and things along those lines. Which, by the way, brings me to tip number 3. Communication. Probably the most valuable thing, and I guess I saved it for last to make sure you watch this entire video, but communication is probably the biggest thing you can do. And you don't have to, if you have a lot of tenants, or maybe you don't want to be dealing with a lot of hassle and headache of a lot of interaction with people and hearing their BS and their excuses, you can automate a lot of this stuff. So you can literally set up an email or a text message automation, very easy to do online for basically free. And if they have any kind of balance after the 2nd or the 3rd of the month, it automatically sends them a reminder email or text, or you could even do this by paper mail, I suppose, too, and lets them know, hey, listen, you have a balance on your account. Please square up with us immediately. Thank you very much, et cetera, et cetera. Or, we have not received your full payment this month. To avoid legal action, please take care of this right away. And maybe something else disclaiming it. If you have in fact made your payment in full this month, and this maybe crossed in the mail while you sent your payment out, we apologize. Thank you very much for sending in your payment. All those kind of things are something you can automate, so it doesn't take a lot of your own time to handle. However, it does a couple of great things for you. First of all, it does follow up. It lets people know that you're paying attention, you're looking for your money, you're holding them to their responsibility. Obviously, they would be doing the same to you if they had something that they needed you to follow your responsibility on, like fixing the heat. They're going to be calling you every day. If the heat doesn't work, you're going to be calling them and contacting them every day if their rent isn't paid. Same kind of dynamic here. It also gives you an opportunity to establish the fact that they didn't perform something and you were essentially calling them out on it and objecting to it. In many states, certainly the one we operate mostly in, what happens is if a tenant always pays their rent late, say somebody always pays their rent that's due on the 1st, they don't pay it until the 15th. What happens if you never send them a notice about it, never object to it? Eventually, one day you finally say, you know what, I've had enough of this. And on the 7th of the month, you start an eviction process. Well, after they've been paying late, 15 days late for a whole year, and you never objected to it, it can be very easily argued by the tenant or one of their really shady lawyers, let's face it, that they have established a new due date with you, and now they're actually not late. In fact, you sent them an eviction notice when you had no business doing it, because their due date was now officially the 15th, because that was what became the new practice of the tenancy. And you actually maybe overstepped and did something, illegal or deceptive. Unfair or deceptive is the term they'll probably throw at you, by serving them a notice on the 7th of the month, even though you had a contract originally that had their rent due by the 1st. Absolutely amazing situation, but these folks will often find any way they can to turn a situation around where they're the offending party, and they'll make themselves out to be a victim. So you don't want to get caught up in that. Having established great communication and making sure that you're sending out text, emails, postal mail, whatever it might be, to object to the fact, letting them know, hey, your rent is late, starting an eviction process if it's over a certain amount of time late, or maybe a certain dollar amount late. And you know what? Phone calls are fantastic too, but again, I understand a lot of people don't want to get stuck dealing with a 20-minute, maybe argumentative phone call, chasing people for money. You can't get into that, or you don't want to deal with that stress. No problem, but sometimes a tenant might initiate a phone call to you. And with that, I always say, if you're going to have a verbal conversation, make sure you put a recap of that conversation into some kind of writing, a letter or an email. Note it into a journal for yourself to keep as part of your business records. And make sure in that communication and in that conversation, you can let them know if they're subject to receiving a notice to quit, if they're subject to receiving an eviction notice, first step. And you can do that very politely by having that conversation with them, by saying, listen, thanks so much for talking with me. I understand you said you're going to send in your payment on the 15th, and it's the 3rd now. I understand you're late. Thanks for letting me know your money's going to be a little bit late this month. Just so you know, we do have a process that we have to follow for everybody. We have to treat everybody the same. So even though you told me that your rent's going to be late and that you're totally going to send it in, I'm still going to have to send you. We still automatically will send you this notice, and it is technically the first step in an eviction process. But tell you what, as long as you do what you're promising already that you're going to do, that notice you can just tear it up once you've received it after your payment's been made. So we'll nullify and void out that notice as long as you do what you're already promising you're going to do. So that's a great way to mentally prepare somebody to understand that they're going to get this notice. Without maybe taking that step, what could happen is they'll get that notice from you and they'll flip out, and now they're not going to send in that payment. I just talked to him 3 days ago. He said it was fine. First of all, you never say it's fine to pay late. You thank them for letting you know that they're going to pay. Thank them for making sure that they're going to pay. But you never tell them, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you contacting me and letting me know that your rent's late. I would appreciate you getting that in as soon as possible. In the meantime, we do have to treat everybody fairly, so we are going to have to send you the same notice that we send to everybody that that is behind or missing a rental payment. But if you do go ahead and get your payment in, like we just talked about, you can go ahead and just tear up that notice afterward. We'll void that out. Otherwise, like I said, what's going to end up happening is they're going to turn around, get that notice, and could very well, if you didn't prepare them for it, could very well dig their heels in and say, well, look, I'm not paying them now. Well, screw that. I'm keeping the money, and I'm going to call the Board of Health, and I'm going to get them in trouble for this, or I'm going to get a lawyer for that, and they'll dig in and often become adversarial. You don't want to get in an adversarial situation. That's why it's really important, like I said, tip number 3, to make sure you're keeping your lines of communication open at all times. I hope you found this helpful. I hope we were able to help you learn a little bit more about real estate, hopefully before you jumped in and have to recover from some mistakes. Remember, that's what we set this channel up all for, is to help pay it forward so that you can avoid some of the struggles and hardships that we went through as we learned as we went through this business. So please, once again, take a moment and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We really appreciate you sticking around and viewing our content, and we'll see you on the next video.